All right. So today we're going to talk about, in our 8th session, we're going to talk about working with vulnerable populations, and then also personal and professional satisfaction, or kind of work-life satisfaction. And so I am going to switch over to my PowerPoint. Okay. So just a little bit about the work life, or about the vulnerable populations. So I just want to share with you a little bit of the kind of what they're considering vulnerable populations and some of the other pieces. So what is, or underserved audiences? You hear it both ways. So underserved populations include, but they're not limited to, the immigrant or ethnic groups, rural residents, urban youth, the unemployed, the LGBTQ plus youth, and then the homeless. They also, there's a terminology within USDA and NIFA that they talk about vulnerable populations. And that's really the term that's been used a lot in 4-H. And that's demonstrating that the groups that I talked about in the underserved populations are exposed to high risks, both developmentally, emotionally, mentally, physically, and socially. So there is a really good website for vulnerable populations, and I just want, I think it's very much worth going to look at. Let me see, I think it'll take us there. Okay. So I'm just going to show you really quick so this is the USDA website, and it does have some really, I think it's got great information. The thing that I really like about it is it gives these fact sheets about children and youth with disabilities, the disconnected youth, immigrant youth, incarcerated. The other thing is I have put that into, I've saved all of those, and I'm going to put them into the box file with all of the other handouts, but I think it's worth going to. This page is one to keep in your arsenal of websites. So just to talk a little bit about some of those underserved populations. So they found that there's about 110 million minorities, and that makes up about 35% of the population. And this is in the US, sorry. So I believe it is. And then 1 in 10 counties has a minority majority population. So if you look in the South, you've got about 55% of the population are African Americans. In the West, about 43% are Hispanic, and in the West, there's about 34% that are Asian. The U.S. is projected to become one of the first majority-minority nations for the first time in 2043. What I've heard is they say by 2050, the last name Gonzalez will overtake Smith as the most common last name in the United States. And by 2060, there will be about 225 million minorities, which equals about 57% of the population. So essentially, when you look at it, by 2060, what we consider minorities now will now be the majority. So when you look at also, we talked about, when I said the urban or the vulnerable populations, they consider rural youth and urban youth as vulnerable populations. And so rural youth, there's about 63 million people. About 1 in 5 Americans live in rural areas. And then in urban, there's about 250 million youth, or 250 million Americans that live in urban cities. What I find really interesting is, the fact that 75% of the U.S. population shares about 3% of the U.S. land area. So that's a real concentrated area. And 15.4% of rural U.S. citizens live in poverty compared to 11.9% of the urban residents. So many times when we think about urban versus rural, we think about, we think about the urban poverty levels, and actually it's higher in the rural areas. So just some population growth projections. The white population or Caucasian population is projected to peak in about 2024 at 199.6 million, up from about 197.8 million. They project that it's going to slowly decrease and falling by nearly about 21 million people from 2024 to 2060. The Black population is expected to increase from 41.2 million to 61.8 million over the same period. So what they're projecting is that there's going to be a slight increase, or it's going to rise up from 13 to 15% in that time frame. And the Asian population is projected to more than double. So they're saying that there was about 15.9 million in 2012, and it will go up to 34 million in 2060. And they think it's going to climb from 5.5% to 8% in that same time period. And then this is the Hispanic population is going to more than double from 2012 to 2060. So they're expecting by 2060 that 1 in 3 U.S. residents are going to be Hispanic. So we need to start thinking about that as we're looking at our programs, and how are we going to, I mean, granted 2060 is not in my lifetime, but we need to be thinking about how we're going to, how we're moving forward within our program. So you can see here again, this is just a U.S. Census chart. Some people like to see it written, some people like to see it in the chart form. So the top 10 states with the largest Latino populations, this is what from 2011. So it may have changed a little bit in the recently, but I don't believe so. If you look at California, about 27.8% of their population is Hispanic. In Arizona, New Mexico, Texas. So I think that is really, I think it's good to know. And if you look at the West, we're all right up there. So talking a little bit specifically about the Latino population. So, but in 2010, about 34.9% of Hispanics were under the age of 18, and that compares to 20.9% of non-Hispanic whites. So when you look at the Census Bureau, we had more Hispanic youth than we did non-Hispanic youth. By 2018, it's projected that Latinos will make up about 18% of the workforce. It'll be interesting to find that out at the end of 2018 if that's really true. And the share of the young Latinos enrolled in college doubled from 2009 to 2010. So again, those are things that we need to be thinking about. Latino health factors. So as we're looking at healthy living programs or those types of things, we need to be thinking about some of our health factors. Hispanic youth have the highest childhood obesity rate in the country. About 2 in 5 Hispanic youth are overweight, are what's considered overweight or obese. The Latinos are disproportionately affected by HIV or AIDS, and they're 3 times more likely than to be infected. Latinas are about 20% more likely to die from breast cancer. They have exceeded all other racial or ethnic groups with the largest percentage of reported tuberculosis cases in the United States, and this was in 2010. And about half of all Latino youth born in 2000 are at risk for developing diabetes. to look at some of the Asian and African American statistics. In 2010, the largest Asian American populations were in California, New York, Hawaii, Texas, New Jersey, and Illinois. The Asian American population is really more of an urbanized population, with more than 3/4 of those living in metropolitan areas. And I do know that there was a, you know, if you look at the like the demographics of Las Vegas, then there is a higher percentage of Asian Americans that live in Las Vegas than anywhere else in the state. And then looking at African American populations, you can see the top 10. And the death rate in 2009, the death rate for African Americans was higher than whites for, you know, a lot of the diseases that do affect our populations. Welcome, Sharon. Sorry, I sent my email out and it of course got delayed. So you haven't missed a whole lot though. So, okay, good. So looking at kind of our youth population stats. So when we think about this, the proportion of the population younger than 18 is expected to change a little bit between 2012 and 2060. They actually expect it to decrease. And when you really think about the population, you know, you've got a lot of people in my generation and in the generation that's coming up that are choosing to have fewer kids or not having kids. And so you can see where that number could decrease. And there's an estimate that about 50% of children younger than 1 were Hispanic, Black, Asian American, or in other minority groups. So about 50% of the youth born in the United States are, you know, that are younger than 1 are in one of the minority groups. And currently there are about 16 million youth in the United States, and 22% of those live in poverty. And about 45% of the children in the U.S. live in low-income families. So those are things we need to, again, you know, these are all things that we need to think about and we need to reflect on when we're thinking about, you know, about working with vulnerable audiences. And, you know, it really is critical that we reach those vulnerable audiences. Now we're probably becoming more and more prevalent, is because it's more and more socially acceptable, which is great, our LGBTQ plus community. And you know, this is a population we can't ignore anymore. They're everywhere. In fact, I've been getting some phone calls lately, and we've been having some of those conversations about what, you know, policies or, you know, best practices on how to work with this population. So about 85% of the middle school and high school students who identified as LGBTQ plus were verbally harassed at school in the past year. And if you don't know what the LGBTQ plus, it's lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer, and questioning youth. And that is a very acceptable those are very acceptable terminologies. And, you know, really knowing where to find resources to educate both yourself and your volunteers on this. Now, I will tell you, there is a group, there's a committee in the Western region, and Sarah represents us on that committee. She's part of that committee that has been working on some guidelines and some best practices related to, especially to the LGBTQ plus community. There has also been a lot of pushback from what we would consider more of our traditional volunteers. We have not gotten any, but we haven't really introduced much here in Nevada. As we start introducing some of these pieces, you know, we're looking at camp and how can we implement some pieces at camp. A couple of things that we're doing in all of the cabins will have screens so that the young people have a private place to change their clothes or to change. The bathrooms are going to be more private. When we do our renovations, we're going to do more private privacy issues within the bathrooms. There's just a lot of, or where do we house youth? There's always those questions of gender. I mean, I know many of you have already, we've seen the question of gender on the evaluation form. We've been working, trying to get that more accepted at the national level, and it's slowly, but there is some resistance. There's been a couple of blog posts, I guess, about from very conservative religious groups that are not happy about 4-H taking on this. They feel like 4-H is, a sacred, rural, traditional, conservative organization, and so they're not feeling very comfortable about it. So, as we move forward, be prepared for that, but it's fine. I'm prepared for it. I think everybody else is pretty prepared for it. I do want to share with you, hi Sarah, hi Billy Sue. And Sarah, if you have anything you want to add, I think it's, this is, like I said, this is one of those audiences. I do want to share with you, there's a couple of documents that I have put into sorry, I'm trying to find the file right now. I have put or they will be in the box file so that you can you can see these, but let me pull up. California has done probably one of the best jobs around LGBTQ plus communities. So this is a packet, as they call it, that really has some good information. And I'm still trying to find a copy of what the West put together. I just can't find it right now. But, it gives some really good information. It also has, some good explanations. And it, gives some good, there's some examples that you can have. So that one will be shared with you, as well as I found another, there is one on camp. So California has also put together, trying to pull it up. They have also put together these 4-H camp practices for working with this is more of the LGBTQ plus community. And I think, we've talked about at some point trying to do something like this, and it's something that we'll be looking at in the future. So again, these are both in the box files, so those will be available to you to look at. Okay, so then how is your program reaching the underserved audiences? And this is really more of, we need to be thinking about, so what do we need to do to position ourselves for our changing demographics? And for those of you that jumped on a little bit late, there was some conversation about the changing demographics, and essentially what the U.S. Census Bureau and everybody is moving, or what they are predicting, is that right now it's about 35% of our population in the United States is minorities. They expect that by 2060, which I know seems like a long ways away, but it's really not as we're moving forward. They predict that there will be about 225 million minorities in the United States, which will equal about 50% of the population. So when you think about the minority youth, that's, we need to be looking about how are we going to be positioning ourselves. And then it also, the rural versus urban, we have about 62 million youth, or 62 million people living in rural populations, and then about 250 million living in urban cities. And that is about 75% of the US population shares about 3% of the land mass in the United States. So, and then just the growth projections are, they expect that the white population is going to decrease by nearly 21 million people by 2060. They expect the Black population to rise slightly from about 13% to 15%. The Asian population to go from 5.1% to 8%. And then the Hispanic population, they expect to double, or more than double by 2060. By 2060, they are predicting that 1 in 3 US residents will be Hispanic. So, you know, again, as we're looking at and moving our program forward, we need to be thinking about those things. And yes, when I talk about, Sarah, when I talk about the, sorry, I'm trying to pull up the chat box too. When I talk about the document about what the West put together, it's the one that you guys drafted and then gave to USDA. Somehow it has disappeared off of all of our, I could probably get, if you've got a copy, that'd be fantastic. If not, then I need to find a copy of it. But, you know, just so looking at, you know, we need to look at those things. What partners do you think we're going to need when we're thinking about, the, you know, working with these underserved or these vulnerable populations? And one of the things that I didn't share is there are actually other vulnerable populations. You know, you've got youth with disabilities is a vulnerable population, the disconnected youth, immigrant youth, incarcerated youth, foster, you know, youth that are in foster care, and homeless, youth that are experiencing homeless. And again, I've got those fact sheets, and within the PowerPoint, I do have a link to the USDA NIFA website that has the information about the vulnerable populations. They've got some really, really good stuff on there. And so that's in there, but I also have all of the fact sheets that are on there, and I'm going to put them into the box file. I highly, highly suggest that everybody goes through and reads those. I think that they are really important. And then this is one, you know, if you can think of what are some opportunities or what are some challenges that we have in trying to reach some of, you know, when we're working on programming to reach these youth. So if people, you know, if you feel comfortable sharing those in the chat box, that would be great. I see both. I see tremendous opportunities, and I also see tremendous challenges. And so that's part of what we need to be, you know, as we're thinking about. And then as, you know, if you want to type in there, the other question to be thinking about is how should we focus? So, you know, what do you think is going to be the best way to reach these youth? Do you think it's through STEM programs? Do you think it's through healthy living programs? Do you think it's through food security? You know, do you think it's through, you know, delivery modes? How are we going to potentially reach these youth? And I'm going to go through some more things related to this, and then also related to civil rights based on our lovely civil rights audit that we had. But I just want everybody to be thinking about these issues. So as we're moving into civil rights, I want to really let people understand what the policies are related to civil rights, as well as what our obligations are. So University of Nevada, Reno is committed to providing a place of work and learning free of discrimination based on a person's age, disability, whether actual or perceived by others. This includes that service-connected disabilities, gender, including pregnancy-related conditions, military status or military obligations, sexual orientation, gender identity or expression, genetic information, national origin, race, or religion. And if we do discover that discrimination is found to have occurred, the university will act to stop the discrimination and to prevent it from its reoccurrence. So that is our statement for the for affirmative action, and so an equal opportunity. So this is a statement that needs to be on all of our documents, including flyers, including registration forms, all of those pieces, so that everybody sees it. And when you think about this, so not only does University of Nevada, Reno doesn't allow discrimination, the U.S. Department of Agriculture prohibits discrimination in all of its programs and activities. So here it gives you you can see all of the pieces here. And it also tells you if you want to file a discrimination, a complaint of discrimination, you can, this is where you go at USDA. Now, I will tell you at this point, that would be, a big discrimination. What you want to do is, on the next page, and it's really small, I know, but to talk about kind of our Title IX information for our employees. So essentially, if an employee believes that you're being subjected to discrimination or sexual harassment by anybody, you're encouraged to, first of all, if you can, ask that person to stop. And if they do not, then you move on to the next phase. So these are the things, you can file a complaint with your immediate supervisor, and then that person then immediately contacts the University of Nevada. And there's specific individuals. If you feel uncomfortable discussing it with your immediate supervisor, you can bypass that supervisor and go to one of the specific people. And I'm actually going to share with you the email or the website where you do file those complaints. And then after that complaint is filed, then there is an investigation and there is action. This part comes directly out of the university's discrimination and sexual harassment policy, which on the next page is where we find that. So if you want to file a complaint with the university, this would be the website that you would go to. And then here you click here to file for a formal complaint. Then, and it gives you your procedures. And then right here is the policy against sexual harassment. I'm actually going to go back. This is the website. If you want more information about this, if you do want to find that, then here is the discrimination and harassment website. It is the Office for Equal Opportunity in Title IX. This is, if you have any questions, any concerns, anything, please don't hesitate to look on this website and do something. Do not feel like you are being stopped from doing that. So you can see, it's got a lot of information. If there's a hate or bias incident report, then there's a different form to fill out. But again, this is the website. So you can see sexual misconduct, a discrimination, sexual harassment, reasonable request. So this might be if you need accommodations, or a hate or bias report. So everybody now has that website. And I'm gonna, okay. Any questions regarding that? That was one of the things in our civil rights audit that came up, was they weren't sure if everybody knew where to go for that information, you know, if they needed to report something. And so not only do I feel like it's critical to have in our training, but I also think it's, you know, important that they, or, you know, that I was glad that it was pointed out, because I was going through my presentation yesterday and this morning, and I was like, you know, it's not very clear. And so I decided to really try to make it as clear as I could. All right. So again, you know, our University of Nevada Cooperative Extension program participants, they're making, you know, both our volunteers, our staff, and even our young people are making decisions or carrying out actions on behalf of Extension. And it's our responsibility to make sure that our program is inclusive to everybody. And that's really where we're trying to, you know, where we're talking about some of these pieces. We have to make sure that we're not being exclusive, we're being inclusive. One of the reasons that 4-H enrollment is open year round, when we advertise 4-H programs, you know, we can advertise that the deadline for fair, you know, the deadline for enrollment to participate at the fair is this date. But just understand that 4-H enrollment, or if you have a specific, you know, if you need somebody to be registered and enrolled before they can participate in a countywide contest, you can advertise it that way. You just can't say 4-H enrollment deadline is May 1st. It has to be specific, because young people can enroll in 4-H at any given time. And we need to make sure that our volunteers and our young people all understand that as well. And then, you know, it's also it is important that our certified, screened, and or enrolled volunteers that work in Extension, that they're responsible for following our policies. And so again, you have to make sure that we are, you know, that your volunteers understand all of these policies that we have. You know, we're not trying to be stinky. We're not trying to be mean. It's just critical. Couple of things that have come out of the civil rights audit in the future. This is step one. We have to have a kind of more of a training process. So this is step one of our training process, is this section, this working with vulnerable audiences and the whole civil rights will be in the orientation. Then the second part is we are going to be, and I'm not sure, I don't know how this is going to, where this is at as far as the university, or as far as cooperative extension, but we are going to be having cultural competency training for everybody. And so it's going to be required that everybody go through cultural competency training. And there's some really good ones. I know Sarah's certified to do the Washington State. They probably have one of the best cultural competency trainings that I've seen. We are working with other, or, you know, we've got to get more trained, because we can't just have one person trained. So again, you know, that's going to be coming up. The other piece is unfortunately, I know it's more paperwork, but there is going to be a document that all of our clubs are going to have to sign every year that states that they understand what our affirmative action and our civil rights requirements are, etc. And then that will be put into their file. So it's just one of those things that USDA is starting to make us do. So when we talk about our barriers, let's talk about a few of our barriers when it comes to trying to meet our requirements, or our obligations, I should say. So when you look at this, there's language, there's culture, there's economics, there's access, and then special communication needs. So those are pieces, and then there's some additional ones. You've got distance and location, underserved audiences, learning abilities, and special needs. Couple of things that I briefly talked about too. One of the other pieces is we're looking at these barriers too. When we look at our group enrollments, we don't collect data we don't collect names and email addresses or anything on our group enrollment group, our young people that are enrolled through groups. We're trying to figure out a way to get that information, but we know it's going to be really tough to do. And so one of the things that we need to do in order to get them the information about because the goal is not to just continue to have them in group enrolled programs, but to eventually move them into our club program. What that club program looks like, it just depends on your county. We can talk about what that looks like. It could be short-term clubs. It could be, what they call spin clubs. It could be, more of our traditional year-round clubs. It could be, those are things, but the goal is to really move them into that club programming. And so what you should do is with those group enroll, when you go in to do programming with those young people, maybe it's an in-school or an after-school program or a community center or whatever, take your flyers about your opportunities for 4-H in your county. So maybe you take the flyers about camp, and you let them know about those opportunities. You let them know about some of the, maybe the overnight events that you're doing or some of the day camps that you're doing. You want to make sure that they know about those. So talking about language barriers, this really shouldn't limit our program participation. You want to do your best to provide participation opportunities that are not specific to one audience. I know it's hard when you have people that do not speak the majority of majority language, but we can work with you. We do have ways right now. Right now I'm really pushing extension to try to get some certified Spanish translators that work just for extension, because we have so much that needs to be translated. Whether that happens, I don't know. But again, we have ways of getting things translated if you do need specific documents translated. So it's not cheap. It's not super easy, but we can work with you to do that. And sometimes it's great if you have somebody in your community that that speaks Spanish. Maybe you have them come in and do a session, or co-teach a session with them, and where you offer Spanish language, and then or I know, and I see Karen's on here now, and in Vegas, I think at one time she told me there were 250 some languages spoke in the city of Las Vegas. Well, we know that we cannot translate everything into all 250 languages, but one of the other pieces that was suggested within the civil rights audit is that we do a kind of a needs assessment, or a barrier analysis is what they called it. Don't ask me what that means, but anyway, I call it kind of a needs assessment of what languages are most prevalent in the state of Nevada. We know English, we know Spanish, but what are some of those others that we maybe need to be thinking about? Then we've got cultural barriers, and I probably see it more so now than I ever have, just living in a bigger city. And my son's best friend is Muslim. And so, we're learning more about that culture, but, we need to be thinking about those things. The one that, it depends on what part of the state you live in. I found that here in Reno, Sundays are not a problem to do programs. When I lived, in North Dakota, it was, there was not the only thing that was open on Sundays before noon were gas stations and a few restaurants. Even Walmart was closed until noon on Sundays, and that was state law. So it was statewide that was the case, and so I wouldn't dare have done a program on a Sunday. And it depends on the community you live in. Some communities, Sunday is off record. Some communities, Saturday is not allowed. We have that as well. I had a county one time call me at 6:00 at night saying that they had a complaint because their market animal sale during the fair was on a Saturday, and they had a religious objection to that, and their rule stated the young person had to be there. And so I ended up having to call the university attorney, because this was all happening like within the next day. Of course, waiting until the last minute, but I called the university attorney at home and had to get his opinion on, what we needed to do with that. So thinking about those things. So we want to make sure that we're scheduling events that don't conflict with major religious or ethnic holidays or events. If you have somebody that is, if you have a large Jewish population, you want to make sure that you're not scheduling things on Jewish holidays, not just our traditional Christian holidays, or Muslim, if it's a large Muslim population. Sometimes you just can't help but do that, but if you can try to, at all possible. Staging events or activities that don't happen in, you don't want to have things that are in potentially uncomfortable locations. Churches, bars, private clubs, or locations where groups were previously rejected. Those are some pieces. I know this is really funny, but there's like about 4 states in the United States that some extension staff are not allowed to travel to. Because of their state laws related to LGBTQ plus, or related to race, or some of those pieces. I didn't know that until just recently. But think about those things. And then program activities that include food and activities that are, you want to make sure that you're sensitive to those religious or cultural, dietary, or behavior restrictions. Again, if you've got a large Muslim population, you're not going to serve pork. You need to have something else. I have to remember that every time I have Zaid come over, and he can't, there was some, I think marshmallows he isn't allowed to have because there's some kind of pork product in a marshmallow. And so trying to think about all of those, because we usually, if we have boys over, we order pizza, and I always have to remember to order just the cheese pizza or a hamburger pizza or something. So thinking about those things. Economic barriers, those are conditions that limit or exclude participation because of, because of the area. Now, for example, conducting programs that involve a high cost to where the members are asked to participate. Now, this is this is difficult, I realize, because we have to charge. We can't. We're moving into a time where we can't provide all of our programs for free. We know that camp is going to cost. It's probably, it's coming down the pike that we're going to have to start charging a statewide 4-H participation fee. Now, granted, we are going to work on that economic barrier, and we will have policies in place before that ever is adopted. That if we have somebody that cannot afford it, we will work with them. We're not going to stop anybody from participating just because they can't afford it. Programs, meetings, tours, activities, or events that are conducted based on high levels of income or affluence. This is one, right now, I feel like our national trips are really geared for those individuals. I have no idea, Sarah, at this point when it's going to be a go or what it's going to be used for. That's why I haven't really, when I was hired, I was it was sent, the information was sent to me. They had done a little bit of investigation. I had kind of put it off. I said, I'm not really quite ready to tackle that one yet. I've tackled that one before and I wasn't quite ready to do that. But about a month ago, Ivory was with all of the other Western regional extension directors, and they were all talking about 4-H enrollment fees or program fees or whatever they call them. And he mentioned it to me. So I've been kind of holding off because it's something that I don't want to do, but it's probably going to have to, I just see the writing on the wall. So we're probably talking 2 years down the line. It'll be announced at least a year ahead of time. And all of those policies and everything will be put in place before we announce it. And we'll have, I'll have an idea of where the funding, what the funding will go for. So don't worry. I'm willing to take the hit for it. I've done it before. I'll do it again. It's not fun, but it is what it is sometimes. So, but again, back to kind of our national trips, I feel like right now those are really geared for our high level income. So I want to try in the next, probably 2 years to try to figure out a way that we can raise money to pay for at least half of the trip for our young people, and maybe then we can get counties to try to buy it or try to pay for part of it as well. I just have to get it, again, it's just trying to get it all situated. And then, programs that require extensive purchases. I know, like robotics does require a lot, that requires pretty expensive equipment, but it's also pretty easy to be able to either get donations or to get donations of equipment or grants or donations from your community to buy that equipment. So those are ones that we need to think about. But, again, and if they're going into a livestock project or if they're going into, some sewing or whatever, they need to expect that it is going to cost them a little bit. We cannot provide all of that for free, but, we need to maybe let them know ahead of time. And then our access barriers, these are really, looking at where are we providing programs? Is it accessible for people with disabilities? We know it's not always going to be where wheelchair accessibility is not provided permanently. Sometimes that just is not the case. We need to have signs located at the entrance, letting them know how to call to get immediate help. We need to be thinking about those things as you're looking at where you're providing programs. And then communications. So when we have people that are either hearing or visually impaired, we need to provide them with accommodations to participate in that program. And so if you have somebody, so that's why it always states on there too, if you need accommodations, please contact by a certain date. And usually you want that date to be at least a week out, if not 2 weeks out from the event, so that you can start making those arrangements. As far as hearing impaired, you may have to get a signing interpreter. And I can work with you or Extension can work with you on trying to figure out where to get those individuals. I'm not sure in Nevada where those come, like I'm assuming we contact the title or contact the university, but I also do not know. Typically those cost money, and so you have to be thinking about that. I know when I first started my career, we did a Master Gardener program in our office, and we knew every year that there was one man that was hearing impaired, and he, so before we even started, we would just start working on getting somebody in there, and that would be built into the budget of the program as well, because you have those situations. Or vision impaired, you might have to have somebody there talking to the person, or it even could be to the point where we need to provide Braille to them. That one, I have no idea how to even start. I've never had to do that, but I'm sure we can find out where to, I mean, I know kind of where to start, but I don't know how to go about doing it. But again, things we need to think about. And then some of our other barriers. So programs that target limited resource audiences. They may not be successful if they have to drive someplace. If you're holding, a day camp in a location and you're advertising it to someone that lives 5 miles away, especially if you're living in an urban setting, that's probably not going to work. You need to be going into those communities and finding so that young people can walk, or parents can walk. And then again, if you're doing programming for families with small children or single parents or even two-earner households or other underserved audiences, they may not be able to participate a certain day of the week, a certain time, or it might be that we need to provide some kind of childcare. That's where our teens come in very handy, where we can maybe do a little bit of childcare for them. Or maybe having, if we're having a program from 6 to 8 for, some of these audiences, we might want to provide dinner because they probably haven't had time to go home. I mean, I know I typically don't have time to go home, get dinner, and get to a program by 6. So learning situations where the subject matter is really too complex, we need to think about that a little bit. Think about learning styles and how we go about that. Yeah, okay, we offer day camps that are targeted for resource. Yeah, you go into their communities, and then I love the arrange for the feeding of those young people through the food banks. And if you have not tapped into your local food bank as that is a fantastic way to get reasonably priced snacks or food, or even if they'll donate it. When I worked in one county, we had an after school program, and we would go to the food bank once a week, and we'd get snacks for the entire week. And we had kids. Okay, food is free to the kids. That's fantastic. I think we paid like 5 cents a pound or something for our food. So essentially we were getting snacks for nothing. And that's a great way to be able to provide food for families or for kids. You can do that. So tap into your food bank. So again, looking at special needs and being able to, we need to try to think about some of those things. How many of you have ever had a young person that is in a wheelchair want to show an animal, show a livestock, so show some kind of livestock, or a horse? Has anybody had that yet? I'm guessing a few of you have. If you have not, you cannot tell them no, that they cannot show. You have to figure out accommodations for that. I've had a young person show a steer in a market, in market. She couldn't really show in showmanship because essentially what happened we were lucky the 1 year, and the steer was super tame. And so she would just kind of put the leash in her lap, put the lead rope in her lap, but she had an adult between her and the steer right there in case that something happened. And so the same with lambs, the same with, pigs, whatever, you have to make those accommodations. So the purpose, some of kind of our specific programs, the purpose of our 4-H is to provide a positive youth development experience that helps our young people experience belonging, independence, mastery, and generosity. And it gives those educational ties to our university. So we need to keep that in mind whenever we're programming. So when we think about educational programs, they provide, through youth and adults, they're going to transfer There's a knowledge transfer, there's life skill development, and there's attitudes for positive youth development. You know, we need to remind, if our volunteers do not want to follow these policies, we need to remind them that it is a privilege to be in 4-H and it's not a right. Or if we have members that are either harassing or giving other members a hard time, we need to give them a warning, and we need to, you know, they don't maybe necessarily need to participate. And so it sounds really harsh, but again, you know, we're open to all. We need to provide a safe, you know, both physically and emotionally safe environment for all young people. Yes, Sharon, you've had disabled youth, but not in a wheelchair. We can do it. Again, you know, if we have individuals who violate the code of conduct or whose conduct is deemed detrimental to the best, to the best interests of the program, we can exclude them from future involvement. It needs to be documented, but I want to share one situation that I've had and see how you guys would have handled it. So we had a county, it was a multiple county camp, and they were at 4-H camp, and there was a young woman, about 10, that rumors got around that she wrote a note to another girl in her cabin about how she liked her and how, like more so than, hey, I like you as a friend, etc. And so then the other girls in the cabin started, harassing this young lady and calling her, all the names of gay and lesbian, et cetera, et cetera. So how would you have handled that situation? I wish I could turn on my microphone. Turn on your microphones. But I'll give you a second to type it in the chat box. And let me see if you agree with what happened. Hopefully some of you are typing in the chat box. And I know it might take a second. Oh, sorry. Okay, so here's the situation. Hopefully everybody else is like Sarah. So we have a situation where we're having a multi-county camp. One of the staff members is in charge of the camp. So we have about a 10-year-old girl is in a cabin, and she supposedly writes a note to one of the other young ladies in the cabin saying how she liked her and et cetera, et cetera. More not necessarily as a friend, more on the other side. The other girls in the girl that got it was, supposedly mortified. The other girls in the cabin started giving this young person a hard time, calling her all the names in the book, gay, lesbian, the whole gamut. And I guess my question is how would you have handled that situation? Okay, sit the cabin down, discussion, okay. Okay, it is a really good, it's a good teachable moment. It's, and again, nobody could produce the note, nobody could, there's all those types of, okay. Yeah, I think adding that discussion, I think it's, and again, these kinds of things can come up. Teens and adults first, yes. I think that would be one to talk to all of the teen counselors, all of the adults, make sure you're all on the same page. So here's what happened. They asked the girls to stop. They did not stop. They sent the young lady who supposedly wrote the note home. And it was, they did not really take a teachable moment. They just sent her home. And the reason for sending her home was she was being bullied and they had to remove they had to stop the bullying situation. Did I agree with that? Did I agree with that result? Not necessarily, because number one, the girls that were being the bullies, they could never produce the note, and there was no indication that it really truly had happened. And so again, yeah, I don't know. I found out about it after it was all over, and it was, yeah, I was not happy with that situation. So again, that's when I sat down and had the conversation with the staff person and said, and this was from somebody that I thought should have known that. I think she was a licensed counselor or something. I can't remember. But anyway, so I just want to share that example and get you thinking about, because especially as we're moving into camping situations, we could potentially have that, whether it's an LGBTQ plus situation, or it's they're of the wrong color, or they're the wrong, from the wrong side of town, or whatever it is. Be thinking about how you would handle a situation like that. So just kind of one last thought on diversity. So I love this quote. We all should learn from crayons. Some are sharp, some are dull, some are pretty, some have weird names. They're all different colors, but they all live in the same box. And so we need to remember, we all live in the same box. We're all different, but yet we can all get along. So, all right. Any questions related to working with the vulnerable populations? And I think, if you have a chance, take that quote, make it big, hang it up somewhere. I think it's, just to remind people of those. All right. So now I'm going to, in the 20 minutes I have left, I am going to talk about work life, and this is where we have kind of a question mark. So, and you'll find out why I have kind of a question mark there to begin with. Sorry, I have to pull up my participants list. I have to pull up my chat box again. Okay. Every time I unshare and share my screen, it goes away. So as we look at work life, kind of that whole question. And really, I'm going to talk about personal, professional satisfaction, how we achieve some of those things. But when you think about work life, this depiction is showing it very balanced. This was a term that was introduced about 20 years ago, and what they found now, it's one of the biggest blunders that has ever happened in corporate America. Newsweek magazine says that about 70% of employees say that they had work-life balance today, less work-life balance today than they did even 10 years ago. It just depends. Some companies are renaming it work-life effectiveness, work-life integration. And what I've kind of done a little bit of research into this and found that what I like, okay, thanks, Sharon, and it's recorded, so you'll get the recording. but you know what I've looked at a lot of stuff, and what I like is looking at your personal satisfaction versus your professional satisfaction, and really understanding that you're not going to always be satisfied in your personal life, and you're not always going to be satisfied in your professional life. So figuring out how it's acceptable, how it might not always be, again, kind of some of those pieces. So, really, you're looking at that, is work a part of your life? Is your life a part of work? You can't separate the two. The average person spends more time working every day than doing anything else. You sleep, you work, and you're home for the most part. It's not surprising when employees don't respond favorably when they're asked work-life balance questions. So, really, when you think about separating that personal and that professional aspects of the individual life, you have to, consider them separate to kind of think about the insight, but the practical. So an example of that, when you show up to work and one of your family members is homesick, especially if you have children and they're homesick, you're distracted at work, and you're disengaged a lot of times from work because you're trying to figure out, how to care for them and how to deal with that. Another example is you've completed a really great project at work, or something really great happens at work. For me, that's usually when I can finish my to-do list at the end of the day. I get super excited. And you go home, you've got all that positive energy, and you go home and you want to share that success with your family. And so again, they're all integrated. So, again, that work-life balance, we know that, it's kind of, sometimes it's a joke. And so this is really to give you more, some ideas of maybe how to help you with some of those pieces. So again, this kind of personal versus professional satisfaction. Satisfaction is different for everybody. What gives you satisfaction may drive me crazy, and what gives me satisfaction may bore you to death. It's your responsibility to figure out and to create that satisfaction. Are you going to be satisfied all the time? No, it's not possible. But when it is possible, we want everybody, we know so because everybody in the room can feel that satisfaction. And everybody has felt that satisfaction at one point or another. Oftentimes that satisfaction comes after times of stress, intense suffering. We know that it's usually going to follow some type of delayed gratification. So just remember kind of those things. So when we also think about burnout, because a lot of times burnout and satisfaction kind of go hand in hand. And so when we talk about burnout, here's some things that we know. And this is especially about extension. Extension professionals feel like they're underpaid. I hope that none of you have ever tried to figure out your hourly wage, because truly, so especially for those of you that are exempt employees, and that you don't work by the hour, you work just until the job's done. I tried that one time and I gave up because I got pretty depressed at about $3 an hour, and so it wasn't worth my time. We do this because we love it and because of the change that we're making in the young people. But we also know that extension professionals feel like they're, you don't want to know it since you became it, extension professionals feel like their workload has doubled. And, with the state reporting, the federal reporting, the program evaluation that's required, oftentimes the work is repetitive. And I completely agree with all of those things. And every time I have to bring something up to all of you, hey, I need this now, it bothers me so much because I know how much is already being required. But unfortunately, it's usually passed down to me from someone else above. We have conflicting priorities, our family, the workload, career advancement, you know, all of those things, they all conflict. The lack of appreciation or acknowledgement for a job well done. You know, there's this article found that a lot of individuals didn't feel like they were appreciated or there was acknowledgement of that job. The lack of local resources, the support for programming efforts. This is probably the one I have felt the most in the last, you know, probably 10 to 15 years, you know, especially as budgets are being cut. That is really one that's tough, you know. We just don't feel like we have a lot to do with. And then the increased workload and the stress of the academic requirements. Again, you know, as we're so often, especially, yeah, exactly. We accept these jobs knowing what the workload is, and exactly. And that's why I'm just trying to, you know, we know that. Again, I said we all took these jobs because we loved, and we keep these jobs because this is what we love to do. And so we just adapt. And so I'm, you know, hopefully some of this will help you figure out that personal and professional satisfaction. Because again, it's something I've had to really, I've had to I've had to work on. So here's some strategies. Invest in yourself. So as we're thinking about, you know, this being satisfied, you know, protect your time. Make sure that you're taking annual leave. You know, that's probably the one that's tough. Drives me insane when I have, you know, when people are like, you know, I'm now losing hours because I'm at the point where I can't add any more hours to my annual leave time. It's like, then take time off. You need to be able to do that. Use professional scheduling. You know, talk to your supervisor and see if you can do professional scheduling. I know, especially with our classified employees, that is what we call flex time or comp time or whatever the terminology is. You know, that's kind of that professional scheduling. For those of you that are exempt, you know, it might be, you know, there's a way to do that professional scheduling. If you know you have to stay until 9 o'clock at night, maybe you don't come in until 9 or 10 in the morning. That's that, you know, again. The one that is the hardest, especially with these nowadays, that's my phone if you didn't catch it. Do not check your email or your voicemail when you're on vacation. That is the one that gets me every time, is that email and voicemail. I've gone on one vacation that I actually took my phone and I turned off my email. I did check it once. We were gone for 2 weeks as well. It was when I graduated with my PhD and we went back to North Dakota and then we drove home. And there was one night I did turn on my email just to make sure there was no like critical emails. For the most part, if anybody had a critical issue, they would text me and then I would text them back and say, you know, I can get to it in so-and-so days. That is, you know, again, that's probably one of the toughest. Have a no email at night rule. The funniest thing ever for me, some of you may see emails come out from me about between 8 and 10 p.m. Because sometimes I get productive. My most productive time of the day is between 9 and 11, both AM and PM. And so lately the PM is not quite as much, but sometimes I'll check my email or I'll send emails out because that's when it's quiet and I can get that done. Well, this was in another job. I sent out an email and it was like 11:30 at night. And knowing that, you know, okay, people will respond to me in the morning. I got a response back from a county person that night. And I'm like, what are you doing up? And why are you checking your email? And she's like, well, I should ask you the same thing. So, you know, I think it's really important that we try to have that no email at night rule. If you see an email from me, don't feel like you have to respond to it right away. It's okay. I'm probably sending it expecting that I'm going to get an email in the morning. If it's something critical, I may text you about it, but usually it's not. Regularly schedule long weekends. Get out of town. Really, if you can't get out of town, at least have a staycation and stay at home, but try to take a few days off. And find somebody that'll hold you accountable for doing some of these things. I think that that's really an important piece. Develop a life outside of extension. This is probably the hardest. This is hard too, but take a class that interests you. Maybe you want to take a language or pottery or dance or something. For me, I finally decided one day I needed a hobby. And so, I'm working on hobbies now. It's not, it's slowly going, but I'm working on some hobbies. I've taken a couple classes in photography and some of those things. Get out and exercise, even if it's just get up and walk around the building or whatever. The one thing I miss more than anything about my time in Idaho was our state program leader that was there, Jim Lindstrom. He and I would have walking lunches. So whenever the two of us were in the office at the same time, which sometimes it wasn't always happened, but we would go out and we would walk for an hour. Now, granted, the bad thing is we'd usually stop and pick up lunch and then, and either eat there or take it back to the office. Probably not the most healthy thing, but it's still, it was really a good, now granted, we would a lot of times talk work, but we got a lot done during that walking time. But a lot of times we just talked about things that were going on in our lives. And I think that's really important. Get involved in organizations that are not associated with extension. For me, that is my son's sporting events or my son's sports teams. That's kind of where right now, that's where I've gotten involved. When I lived in Moscow, I was in a sorority in college, and my sorority, I was in Moscow. And so I actually volunteered as an advisor for my sorority. It got me outside of extension. And then eating meals with family or friends, whether that's at home or going out to eat once in a while. I think that that's really important. Think about your health, work out and exercise. Again, try to get in exercise, even if it's just walking. Eating lunch away from your desk, or, eating lunch and away from your desk is even better. I'm super guilty of that. I actually now have a refrigerator right behind my desk, and my lunch is usually in it. I'll go heat it up and bring it back to my desk because I, need to get stuff done. If you've got a break room, when I was in North Dakota, we had such a great time in our break room because everybody would go in. We had the nutrition people. We had, I'm trying to think, there was a whole bunch of departments that would all come together in the break room, and we'd have lunch together. And it was so much fun because we'd just laugh and have a good time. And it was that break from the office. Get enough sleep. That's always important. And try to limit your caffeine. Again, these are suggestions. You don't have to do all of them. I really have been trying to be better about limiting, not necessarily my caffeine, but limiting my soda consumption. Try to make things easier at home. Meal plan if you can. I find when I plan meals, right now I'm not having to worry about it, but when I plan meals, it's so much easier when I get home because I know what I'm going to make that day. Nothing worse than saying, what do you want for dinner, and getting something good to eat, and then trying to figure out, that's probably stresses me out more. And that stress then goes on, like you're stressed at home and you come into work and you're stressed. Outsource, also use a crock pot, if you can. That's a great idea. Outsource common tasks. I am always told, Carrie, you need to get a housekeeper. Carrie, you need to get a housekeeper. Because, I don't want to spend my weekends cleaning house. Haven't done it yet, but someday I will. Right now, I kind of have a built-in housekeeper, but hopefully, that'll go away pretty soon, and I'll be able to get a housekeeper. Even if they come in, once a week or once a month and do the deep cleaning things, like clean the baseboards and clean the window sills and do those types of things. Yard work, those just depends. Or Instapot, yes, the Instapot is also, I have one, and I'm not as good at using it as I need to be. Work on delegating and asking for help. Keep a calendar for the children and spouse to access. This is probably the one that I've started doing, and it's helped me tremendously. Establish a routine as best you can. That's not one that I'm ever going to be able to do because things are just crazy, but, anticipate morning rush, transitions, emergencies. I am forever saying, Cody, get all your school books, get everything, get your backpack ready to go the night before. So that way in the morning we can just grab and go. And probably, let's see, we're a month away from school ending roughly, and he's probably done it twice all school year. So again, we always have that morning rush, that morning transition. That's never a lot of fun. And I don't like being a nag to my son. And it just kind of starts your morning, start your whole day off not good. So invest in your career. So think about ways that you can improve yourself. So think about kind of that realistic picture of yourself. And, who are you? What are you feeling? What are your strengths and weaknesses? This will help you to be able to figure out what you can do to improve yourself within your career. Maybe some of the types of professional development that you want to get. Oh, I thought there was another one on there. Guess not. Okay, so think about what you currently know. So what are you good at? What have other people complimented you on? What have others had to help you with on more than one occasion? What project or task does drain your total energy? What would you spend hours and hours doing that you're never going to get tired of? And then what are your hobbies and why do you like doing those? And then thinking about trying new things. You can read those questions. And then you go to, when you think about those things, seeking out professional improvement opportunities. Maybe it is just general organization and how do I keep myself organized? So maybe you find a class that you can do that. It just could be whatever your passion is or whatever you feel like you need help on. I was trying to think of some of the examples. There's been a couple of things that I've done over the years, and it wasn't necessarily like an extension program that I went to. It was just something that I wanted to learn more about because I felt like I was lacking in those skills. And finding a mentor and connecting with them regularly. Again, the state program leader in Idaho, he and I, have a really good relationship, and he is a mentor to me, and he loves it when I call him on days and go, okay, I need mentoring today. Can you help me? And he does. We'll talk through an issue. If I'm having a problem trying to figure out something, we'll talk through it. Or, I might, it might be somebody else. I've got, several mentors over the years, and, it's really important to have that and to have that kind of relationship, that you can call them and say, I need mentoring today. No matter where you're at in your career, you always need mentors. Getting involved in extension committees and professional associations. Again, this is one way, whether you get involved at the state level, the national level, and one thing I'll let you know, like at the national level with the National Association of Extension, or of Extension 4-H agents, sorry, I was starting to say the other one, you can get involved in those committees. And even if you can't attend the national conference, those committees work year round. I just got an email yesterday from the county, or from the virtual professional development committee. There's one that just deals with virtual issues, and they are having, we're having a meeting in next week or in a couple weeks. And so, you can be involved in those and not necessarily go to the meeting. And it's a great way to get to know people from around the country. I pretty much feel like I have somebody in every single state within extension that I can call and ask a question or ask an opinion. It's a great way to do that. Focusing your efforts, here again, we need to focus a little bit, maybe develop and use advisory groups. One of the things that we are going to be required based on our civil rights review by 2019, we're going to have 4-H expansion and review committees in every county. So I've been working with Dr. Lyles, trying to pull together what that looks like. What do those expansion and review committees look like? These are ways that you can then focus in on your programs. Maybe, they can be ones to help you sunset programs and to bring in new programs. Really select 2 or 3 program areas that you have an interest in and a skill set and become an expert in that. It's not saying that's the only thing that you do, but you could become the expert in that area. Within your 4-H program, I think it's important to clearly identify your program goals. And then if you have, that gives you the ability to say no to things. I've had counties call and say, I have somebody call and ask about a YAC project. And you know what I told them? You can say no. We don't have to, there is no YAC 4-H curriculum anywhere. I did do a quick research, I did a quick search for it. But now granted, could we have adapted something? Oh yeah, we could have adapted it. But at some point you have to say no. Is that reaching my goals of the 4-H program? And again, it takes that second one. Understand that we can't solve every problem for every person. It's really, don't allow urgent but unimportant things to change your schedule. This is probably the one that's the hardest thing, because you're going to have somebody walk into your office and urgently think that they need something right then. But you know what? If it's not, if it's really not important, but, then you just tell them, hey, I'll get to it, whenever. Before you take on new tasks, discontinue others, and be in the office during times that you're most effective. Again, I said, now it's kind of becoming between 7:30 and 9 is when when I get the most work done. Kind of my mornings now are my most effective time to get things done. And know that. I have a former colleague that was not a morning person at all, her entire career. So she would come in about 10 in the morning, between 9:30 and 10, but she stayed until 7 or 8 at night, because that was her most productive time, was that evening. Another one, his most productive time was between 5:30 and 10. And so he would come into the office at 5:30 a.m. and he would leave about 3. And so, again, you have to talk to your supervisor about those things, but think about, some of those ideas. So looking at communicating, learn to like your office staff, especially your support staff. Make sure that you have a good relationship and a good communication. Keeping your calendar up to date. And it's okay to put personal stuff on your work calendar so that people know that you're busy. You can put it as, especially in Outlook, you don't have to put, that it's a doctor's appointment or whatever. You can put that, it's a personal appointment. But again, or just show that it's busy. Share your calendar with people. Use auto reply and voicemail to let people know when you're, where you are and what you're doing, and make others aware of what's going on in your life. Staying organized, keeping up with emails and phone calls. I think I have, I think the other day it said I had 11,000. Yeah, I have 11,000 messages in my inbox. I think it's time that I go through and keep, granted, I keep up with I keep up with them. Like, I respond to them, or I look at them, but I don't necessarily file them. Yes, it's time to clean up the inbox. Yes, it is. So, right now I have 12 new messages. So when I get off this call, I'll have to respond to those 12 new messages. develop a system that works to help with yearly reporting. Now, granted, that's something we don't necessarily, more of our educators have to do, but, thinking about, are you going to get all of the information put into 4-H Online, all your group enrollments, all of your, if you're still doing paper copies of enrollment forms, making sure those are in there. Blocking out time. So, even though some of you are not faculty, I think it's really important that we still keep up on research, and that there's a great Journal of Youth Development. It has very basic, it has really good articles about positive youth development, and it might give you some ideas. So, and it comes out, I believe, quarterly. And so, looking at that, or, taking time to read some books. I've got a book right now, I just pulled it off my shelf, that's called What's Next, Gen X. And so this is really keeping ahead, moving ahead, and getting the career you want. So it's really looking at those of us that are Gen Xers that are at the point I'm at, where all the baby boomers are starting to retire and we're starting to move up. So now what do we do? And so I'm taking the time, I'm going to take the time every day, even 15 minutes, to read a little bit of that book. My goal is to maybe put together a workshop on that. But, again, that's just one thing that you can do, or plan programs, or writing your newsletter. Again, finding time to clean and organize your desk. I'm not going to show you what my desk looks like right now, but I do take the time every night and organize my desk before I leave. So that way, when I come in the morning, it's clean and I can get to work. Okay. So find positivity. Vent. You need to find that person you can vent to. I'm super fortunate in the fact, I was just looking to see if he was out there, because he was lurking outside my office a little while ago. I am super lucky that my person that I have always vented to in the full 24 years of my career came to work here and works for me now, because I can vent to him. It's just one of those things. But I do have other people that I vent to as well. But you just, finding that person. My mom is the other person that I vent to. She loves it when I call and talk about stuff that's happening at work. She has no idea who these people are, or what the programs are, but I can vent to her. And, you've got to have that person. Developing a support system. The other piece, smile and say good morning, especially if you're in an office that you have to walk past people to get to your desk or your office. Smile and say hi. I'm the first one in the office now, so I don't have to do that, but it is something you need to do. Breathe, and take breaks from news and internet and social media. Don't read it. This is the one that I probably like the most in have fun. You need to celebrate holidays and celebrate birthdays, making sure that everybody's okay with that. But, I've done it in numerous ways. One county I was in, we all took, because we had a large staff, or not a large staff, but, enough staff. Everybody drew a name, and then they were in charge of that person's birthday. They would get, some kind of treats, and then have a balloon and usually a card. And everybody, and then they were in charge of getting the card signed by everybody. And also getting in charge of doing letting everybody know, hey, at lunch today, we're going to celebrate so-and-so's, or at 2 o'clock, we're going to celebrate so-and-so's birthday. That's really fun. Also, I've also been in one office where we had to bring our own birthday treats. Well, that didn't work so well. I don't think we ever celebrated birthdays. Monthly office outings. I know Sarah's talked about, they have really fun office adventures. I can't remember what she called them, but that's great. Great things to do. Go out and have fun, whether, go out after work or whatever. Those are really, really good. Decorate your office. The one thing I love, the fact that I'm here now and I feel like it's more of a permanent situation, is I was able to decorate my office. You can kind of see a little bit up above. Anybody needs to come by. And I've been finding all my cool stuff. Like I have 4-H bears and stuffed animals from from 2000. So I have those up in my office. You can see behind me the picture. This is the picture with kind of the peach around it. That's a local artist from Boise that's called the County Fair. And it's all livestock. It's all steer butts. And there's ribbons and kids working on steers, and it's just a really fun, but I was able to put it up, and so do that in your office. I've also heard of one person wanted a tropical, she wanted to feel like she was in Hawaii every day she came to the office, so she decorated her office in a Hawaiian theme. So again, or if you have a cubicle, decorating your cubicle, just make it your, personal. Practical jokes. If your office can handle it, do some practical jokes. It just depends on, again, if your office can handle it. And don't go extreme. Don't be a martyr. Develop your network. Use your resources. Ask for help. And I've got just a couple more slides here. One is on time management. I actually did this presentation with a couple of individuals from Wyoming when we were at the Western Institute. And that was, that we were talking about some of the technology that you can use, keeping track of what you did during the day. It might be, writing it down. One of the things that I do is I have a calendar. So this is my paper calendar. You can't really see it. It has the calendar part, so all my appointments, and then every day has a, has a space. And thanks, Sarah. Sorry, I'm going late. Every day has, and I do a to-do list on that day. So again, it's just a good, that's one way. You can do things like TimeTune, or some of these are apps. One of them, they said, will tell you when you've been sitting too long, or if you've been playing on your phone too long, etc. Dot journaling. I don't know much about dot journaling, but it is a thing. I guess you can go on Amazon and buy books on dot journaling. I know a few people that have done that. Plan tomorrow today. And that's one of the things I do is I sit down at the beginning of the week and I kind of do my to-do list. Here's all the things I need to get done this week. And I put them in the date that they need to be done. But I really find that helps. And again, using technology, that's a couple of ways to do it. There's a couple of apps. And then a couple of other things. Calm is one that gives you, I guess it plays relaxing music. It's kind of a meditation one. There's Space or Antisocial, Dragon Dictation. So if you want, if you have a hard time like typing or just trying to take notes or whatever, you can do a Dragon Dictation app, and you can, it will actually type your emails for you. Or the one that I do, because it's so hard for me sometimes to keep track of my mileage, is Mile IQ, and it's an app on my phone. And when I get in my car, it knows when I drive. And then what I do is at the end of that drive, I can either swipe personal or swipe business, and it will keep track of my personal and my business mileage. And then again, kind of that off balance, this is the last slide, but thinking about, all of these pieces and how do we stay satisfied both personally and professionally? Everything I've talked about here can be adapted for personal and professional life. There is a really good book, this one. It's called Off Balance, and it's by Matthew Kelly. This is one, I actually have a whole different presentation that I've done in the past that is, it has an instrument to go through to figure out your personal and professional satisfaction, etc. This book is a really, really good one to get if you want to learn more about that. I also have the copy here, so if anybody ever wanted to borrow it, feel free to let me know. It is, like I said, it is probably one of the best ones that I found. What it does is talks about find a partner, find somebody you can talk to quarterly or whatever, and talk and develop a plan. Talk about what hasn't been working, what's not working in the job, what's not working at home, what can you do differently in the next 90 days? So, when we come back in 90 days, what can be different? What do you want to achieve? Both personally and professionally. And then what will that do for me? again, just kind of things to, you know, it's a great way to, it's kind of that mentor relationship again. And you can find somebody that's, you know, that you work with, or you could find somebody that you know, that you're friends with. I think it's, especially if you're going to be focusing in on work stuff, it's really good to find somebody that understands what you do. I could never do this with my husband, even though we've been married for 20 years. He still doesn't have a clue what I do every day. And so, you know, it's, again, just trying to get that, to talk about it, and that's going to help you to develop those kind of levels. So any questions on that? I know that was kind of quick. I'm trying to stop sharing. So hopefully it gave you some ideas. You know, again, I am not the expert on this. I still, you know, after 24 years of being in this career, I'm still trying to figure out. And, you know, as you hit different stages in your life, you also, you know, then have to reevaluate and figure out how you're going to plan, you know, how you're going to get that work-life balance. You know, it's the app for traveling is called Mile IQ, and it's listed in the PowerPoint. So it is a really good one. I really like it. Now, granted, lately I have been forgetting to use it, but it's a good one. When I do use it, it's really good. And I can always go back. I think the other day I looked and I had like 200 new little pieces that I needed to go back and tell if it was personal or professional. So again, you can do that. And so for me, like, I don't turn in my mileage typically. Like if I'm going to the Washoe office, I don't turn in my mileage to work. What I do is I keep track of all of that, and then because I end up having enough miles at the end of the year, and we itemize on our taxes, I can deduct that from my taxes as non-reimbursed work expenses. And so, you know, you need to look at some of those things too. You know, but it's still good if you're claiming your mileage, or if you're claiming or if you do it on your taxes, either one, it's really good. So, all right, any other questions? And I apologize, I went over again. I should have known that these two topics, I got to make a note that these two topics should not be together because they both go long. So if not, then thank you guys and have a great day and a great rest of the week. I'm just writing down who all was on so I can keep track. So thank you guys and have a great day. And I'll get this stuff posted maybe tomorrow, but I'll get it posted.